Welcome to Study with the Best, the magazine show that's all about CUNY. I'm Tina Beth Pina. Today we're at City Tech as we look at the future through the CUNY lens. We'll go back in time to the futuristic World's Fair of 1964, visit literary utopias, delve into feminist sci-fi films, and so much more. But first, from Robbie the Robot to WALL-E to Transformers, robots have always captured our imagination, and one award-winning team is turning science fiction into science fact.
I'm Ari Goldberg. We're here at City Tech, which has been thrust into the international limelight because of mechatronics. Isn't that right, Tobias?
Mechatronics stands for mechanical and electronics, which is a term invented by a Japanese engineer 40 years ago.
With a grant from the National Science Foundation, Professor Andy Zhang and his colleagues were able to develop the mechatronics department here at City Tech, an emerging field combining computer engineering, mechanical engineering, and electronic engineering, or in a word, robotics. And the program's greatest success? A robot named Tobias.
What is Tobias?
TOBIAS is actually an acronym. TOBIAS stands for Teleoperated Bimanual Augmented System. Teleoperated means that it's remote or wireless. Bimanual, it's got 2 arms. Augmented system, it's a big system when you put it together. I was planning on creating something that was wireless and would be able to mimic my movements, my hand movements, right? That's where I would start. And once I can accomplish that, I can create a whole suit. Everybody who's an engineer has sort of a dream and a crave for the Iron Man suit.
But to build more than a hand, our resident Tony Stark needed some help to get his robot off the ground. Bijan Mokhtari and Angela Kuka joined Eugene in the lab, each bringing different skills to the mechatronics table.
Tobias is essentially a robot that mimics the movements of a human that is wearing the suit. It can do everything your arms can do. It follows your head, and you see what the robot sees with using the helmet.
Every finger has a sensor in there. The wrist has a sensor, the elbow has a sensor, and we processed all that data and spit it out back into the motors that we are using to power the robot, and made those motors copy exactly what you're doing when you're doing it.
Using materials often no more complicated than rubber bands and fishing wire, the team is able to make plastic mimic a person.
You can control the wrist motion here, left and right. This is all 3D printed. And if you pull on the fingers, you can tell that it's a similar design using still rubber bands, which is by far one of the best technologies ever created.
The goal was to make Tobias as universally accessible as possible so that anyone could make one. And with 3D printing technology becoming more commonplace, that's not an unrealistic future.
Half of the robot is actually 3D printed. Without 3D printers, this project would not be possible. The cool thing about 3D printing is you make a plastic part, you make it fast, you don't have to wait for it, right? And then if it breaks, you just remake it again, no problem. You can glue it, cut it, and it's just plastic. It achieves a virtual reality-like experience. It's very immersive because you're actually thinking you're looking through a camera that's planted right on your face, but essentially you're looking through the robot's eyes. Here we trust Tobias enough to hold a knife. Here we illustrate how Tobias can actually do the opposite and pour the water into a cup for us, so he can be your servant.
Even more impressive are the accolades Tobias has won. Every year, tech company Digilent Incorporated hosts an international technology design competition. Tobias won the American contest and headed out to Shanghai to represent City Tech and the USA in the finals.
When we went to the presentation room and people had to vote on it, we won by a landslide.
We were just like, oh, let's hope at least we place somewhere. But we were completely surprised, I think, all of us.
This is the greatest success we have for the college as well, because since we have this grant, there's a huge amount of students want to participate, want to get involved with this kind of activity.
The future for Tobias, I imagine it to be not made purely of plastic anymore. And I imagine it to be a long-range wireless system capable of handling tasks that you in your human body just aren't capable of.
So in the future, theoretically, you could be in the suit in America, and this could be moving in another country.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a little scary thought, but yeah.
The implications of this technology are far-reaching. Imagine a doctor performing surgery remotely, or a technician able to address a situation in a nuclear reactor from afar, or even unmanned spaceflight. It's not science fiction. The technology is available at City Tech and now online and open source for all the world to contribute.
You can have other people take it and suggest ideas on how to make it better. And before you know it, you have something that you would have never been able to accomplish by yourself. But now you have all these people helping it.
From City Tech Mechatronics, I'm Ari Goldberg. This is Tobias for Study with the Best.
We like to think of science fiction films as futuristic, but do they actually have more to do with the present? And with more female lead characters in sci-fi films, is the genre becoming less of a boys' club? Film scholar Ximena Gallardo explores this topic in a conversation with Vianora Dinka.
Oftentimes, science fiction films start with a mention of the year in which the action takes place, and that's one of the thrills of watching that movie. How much do science fiction films have to do with the future, and how much do they actually have to do with the present?
Sci-fi movies are about the future in the sense that they're more like, what if? What if we continue doing this? What if we don't pay attention to global warming? What if we continue doing genetic engineering, changing our bodies? So they kind of take that. So many movies do take that, but they usually end up talking about present problems.
So how fertile a ground are science fiction films for exploring social issues and challenging the status quo?
I don't think they're very fruitful. Some of them are kind of backward in the way that they show the future. Think about it. I mean, most futures that you see in regular Hollywood films are white futures. Whereas on the planet, most of people are brown. Science fiction movies usually have male protagonists, sometimes females, but women are 50% of the planet.
You wrote a book about Ellie and the trilogy. Talk about the heroine and how groundbreaking was having a woman portrayed as she was.
I was 13 years old when I watched Ellie. I had never seen a movie, ever, where a woman survived. And the movie is supposed to be very, very scary, and it is very, very scary. But I can never remember it as that. Most people remember the monster, because I was so fascinated by the fact that a woman was the one that survived.
What's her legacy?
After Ripley, very few female protagonists have been able to express the range of being a protagonist, but also being a female protagonist. They're usually more glamorous, so it's all about body fetish. I'm assuming you've watched The Matrix, for instance. So where Trinity there is a very important character, right? Really, the main feature about her is that, she's in a catsuit and she's holding guns. In the first movie, she's a really famous hacker, but then, of course, Neo comes over and he's better than her at being a hacker. So a lot of science fiction movies kind of leave it at that. You have a very impressive female character, starts really strong, and then, okay, we move on to what is more important, which is the male protagonist.
So seeing a few more strong female characters in science fiction lately, how much does it have to do with acknowledging that women can be strong and featuring them in this genre, and how much does it have to do, or is it in fact just another male fantasy?
It depends on what we're talking about when we talk about female protagonists, okay? There's basically two types. The ones that are constructed as women and are protagonists, and the ones that are constructed as people, and they happen to be female. Trinity is a woman, right? The important thing about her is her womanly attributes, right? That's the most defining characteristic of Trinity.
Hello, Neo.
If you watch a movie like Gravity, right, the whole premise of the movie is that the character played by Sandra Bullock is a person, right? Yes, she is a mom, but she's moved to a level where she can be an astronaut. And more importantly, which is very fascinating, she represents humanity.
You told me prior to the taping that if we want to talk about women being portrayed as lesser than men, there are a zillion movies,
Yes,
to quote
there's a
you,
zillion.
that
It's
you
a sad
can.
thing.
And now you're talking about Hollywood, but what about independent movies? Are things different there?
There are a few movies that are really interesting, and I would consider definitely science fiction. One of them is called Under the Skin, and that is a movie that makes you think, makes you uncomfortable, which is what science fiction should be doing. Should make you think about, why you think the way you think, right? And it's done in a way that is so alienating and strange, but also interesting and alluring, that it makes you think about what is it to be a woman.
You don't want to wake up, do you?
Would you say science fiction movies are still a boys' club?
It's a sad thing, but in the world that we live in, women are not people yet. They will be people eventually. We're working on it. Okay? They are women, which is different from being people. So when you have movies that show women being people, say, like Gravity, it's a step forward.
Ximena, Gallardo, thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Trying to predict the future is no stroll in the park. Actually, for Barry Mitchell, it is.
You think traffic is bad now on the Van Wyck? In 1964, over 51 million people from all around the world converged on this very spot in Flushing Meadows Corona Park to see the future.
Let us explore together the future. A future not of dreams, but of reality.
If you came to the World's Fair in '64, you would have seen something called a picture phone. The problem was Bell Atlantic, who made the phone, they couldn't find a way to make it profitable. So it just kind of went away until the internet came along, and then now we have Skype.
Joseph Torella is author of Tomorrowland, the 1964-65 World's Fair and the Transformation of America.
The World's Fair was really, it was a time when, kind of like the Olympics, the world would descend on one place. But instead of just sports, it was entertainment, it was cultural, it was technological. It was an opportunity for countries of the world to show the best of what they have to offer, whatever that is. We're at the Queen's Museum, which was a building originally built for the 1939-1940 World's Fair. This picture here is the symbols of those fair, the perisphere and the trilon. Walt Disney was a huge component of the '64 fair. Here we have a picture of It's a Small World, which made its debut here. And you went inside and there were children of the world, little audio animatronic children of the world singing It's a Small World.
It was also the real world after all. In November 1963, President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. The Beatles arrived for their first American tour in February 1964. Their cheerful tunes helped lift America's spirits.
Set in 646 acres, the $1 billion show opens its doors to an expected 70 million people.
The World's Fair's opening day was exactly 5 months to the day after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. The Beatles arrive on February 7th at JFK Airport here in Queens, which had just been renamed John F. Kennedy Airport. Previously it was Idlewild.
What are some of the things that didn't come true that the World's Fair said would?
One thing that did not come true, which I'm very glad about, was this giant technological behemoth.
A jungle road is built in one continuous operation. First, a searing ray of light, the laser beam, cuts through the trees.
Chew the forest through and spit out very clean asphalt. So this was a massive technological behemoth that would create roads and highways. Something else that did not come true was this idea that we would have underwater hotels and that the oceans would be tourist destinations.
A weekend, if you wish, at Hotel Atlantis, in the kingdom of the sea. A holiday of thrills and of adventure.
What's more, they also talked about building housing, public housing and homes built underwater so people would live under the ocean, which in 1964 no one thought about the ecological implications of such a thing. For one, if the oceans are polluted now, imagine how much more polluted they would have been if a million people were living in them. At the same time, who says that human beings need sharks for neighbors, or for that matter, sharks need human beings for neighbors?
The World's Fair and the 60s are long gone, but the future is bright for Flushing Meadows Corona Park. Dorothy Lewandowski is Queens Parks Commissioner.
We just received an allocation of close to $6 million, which will allow us to do the first phase of stabilization of the New York State Pavilion. So we're very excited about that. We have a number of cultural institutions in here as well that are remnants from the '64 World's Fair. The Queens Museum is in the park. The Hall of Science, which was part of the '64 World's Fair, has an amazing exhibit.
In fact, I once learned about optical illusions in the Hall of Science in the very peculiar Ames room. I'm feeling taller already. Wow!
And the Queen's Theater is still vibrant, has performances, cultural performances, adaptive plays, you name it. Throughout the year, there's something happening here. There's more to do in this park than just remember the World's Fair.
What's the legacy of the World's Fair in 1964?
The real lasting legacy of the 1964 World's Fair is the fact that if you walked around these fairgrounds 50 years ago, you got a glimpse of what America would actually look like in 2014, not because of technology, not because of the color TVs or anything like that, but because of the people. In 1964, the world came to Queens. Queens is now the most ethnically diverse county in the world, and we as a country are a multicultural nation that no one could have predicted or thought so in 1964. That was the future of America, only no one realized it.
There is new beauty and new strength in the city of tomorrow as it improves the well-being of mankind.
For a look at the political climate of the 1964 World's Fair, log on to our Study with the Best page at CUNY.tv and scroll down to Web Extras. Is there a perfect future? Carrie Hintz, an associate professor at Queens College, explores this very question through the prism of young adult fiction.
I was always interested in science fiction and speculative fiction. I was struck by Charlie the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl as a space where there was an enclosed factory and where there was a whole world of wonderment and production of fantastic things, chocolate waterfalls. But it also had this underbelly of the Oompa Loompas who were living in something like indenturement and slavery. And I started thinking we could use the tools of utopian studies to think about some of these works of fiction for children. One of the things that I think is most significant about these works is the opportunities they give teachers to tie them into a study, to think about combining The Giver or Z for Zachariah in lessons about conformity, lessons about war, and actually make the reading of those books more collective, and sort of gateways to conversations on the parts of teachers and parents, and that's where I have the most optimism. Literary utopia is a non-existent society which is meant to be better than the world in which the author is writing it, and a dystopia is a world which is markedly worse. Utopias were both highly abstract and imaginary, but could also lead us to speculation about real-world politics and questions of governance. One of the most powerful far future dystopias is The Giver, because that is set so far in a future so undefined and so abstract and so much a work of speculation that we can't even locate it in time. It imagines a world where color, emotion, human connection, feeling, history have been erased from memory. So it really breaks the bonds of realism to ask questions about uniformity and sameness. Lowry is one of the first to really tailor that to the adolescent reader. I was teaching The Giver before 9/11. After 9/11, the themes became more urgent for us. The kinds of questions it was raising about safety and what you would give up in order to have your safety assured became very, very interesting and urgent to students. Because in Jonas's world, they've made this bargain to give up so many things. And they've said, it's okay, it's worth it. It's worth giving up everything as long as we're kept safe. And the students found that a really interesting discussion in the light of the security state. Veronica Roth's imagination of a world which has been divided into 5 factions. It's a world that's experienced a terrible conflict, and the engineers of the society have decided that there is a solution to that conflict, which is this rigid system where people are defined and categorized according to their traits. She gives us a character, Beatrice Pryor, or Triss, who is literally divergent. And she uses it a way of talking about conformity and talking about rebellion. And the books sort of chart Triss's growing awareness of her own individuality and her own desire to rebel. With Divergent and The Hunger Games, I think they're fantastically appropriate as movies because they're meant to be propulsive in the action. The Hunger Games movie becomes about the game makers and about the game and about all the plotting, whereas the book is Katniss trying to figure it out, trying to figure out how to survive from moment to moment, how to think about her relationships, particularly with Peeta and Gale, how to respond to the challenges that are thrown her way. And I actually think The Hunger Games is so powerful, especially for young women readers, but for anyone really, because you're seeing her churning thoughts and all her perceptions are so foregrounded. So many of these books are about the failure of adults to change the world and then the necessity of adolescents to take control and to remake the world. This material is powerful to adolescents, partly because its premises are so striking and it helps them rethink reality and see reality in a new way, but also because it says to adolescents, you matter, you have a voice, you can make an impact, and also the idea that a young person can be uniquely heroic is really appealing to the younger readers.
Up next, Samantha Gross, the founder of the new startup Story Tour, explains why the future of going online is actually offline.
It's almost difficult to tell a story these days without it becoming some form of mass media. Even if you're connecting to your Facebook group of friends, you're talking to this faceless mass out there. And so Story Tour just takes that abstract connection and makes a direct one with the audience. I spent a decade as a journalist with the Associated Press. I had the privilege to tell people stories. Telling narrative, stories was always the part that I cared most about. And sometimes it felt to me that I had this great privilege to go see these things in person, really meet people, hear them, share their stories. And that as much as I tried to convey that to my audience through my writing, they could never really get that full experience. So I think ultimately Story Tour came out of that. Why can't I bring the audience with me and give them that in-person experience?
It's going to be a bit of a long walk, and then we're going to come into the building and head upstairs, go through security, and then we'll talk again once we're there.
We call it an in-person magazine. Instead of being able to open it up and read it, people can actually walk into the magazine experience, and that is what we're trying to deliver for people.
It's sort of an event that falls between sort of theater, sort of a tour. So we tend to get people that are actually looking for something innovative, which we think Story Tour is. So it's pretty fun.
The Secret Architecture Blotz was actually created by Lucas Laredo, who is a really wonderful fiction writer and storyteller. And what Lucas chose to do was really create what's essentially a historical walking tour, but it's a walking tour of an entirely made-up history.
Right where we are here, which is the Highline Hotel, that's where it starts. And about half of the background information we give about the hotel is accurate, is right, is correct, and half of it is fabricated, and a lot of the story works that way. I would bet that nobody here today has ever heard of Penelope Marigny. but I am positive that you've seen her work before. Look behind you at the building, the one that looks like the sail of a ship, the windswept one. That's hers.
There's something whimsical, I think, about being able to walk around a workaday space in a city that you think you know, it's someplace you've walked by a million times before, and to have this extra layer of narrative on top of it, it gives people a sense of wonder.
This is my place. When I'm here, I am in a tank of a world made especially for me.
There's kind of like no wall. You're in the setting where everything is taking place. So there really isn't anything like it that I've ever heard of or experienced.
The premise behind nonfiction story tours is that you get to see the place, you get all the description by seeing it yourself, you hear the narrative from the storyteller, but you also get to be there for interviews with, real people. And it's really up to the storyteller to say to them, wait, this is what the story is about. And it's an interesting mix because it's not completely spontaneous. The storyteller does go ahead of time, does pre-interviewing with the people so that they know what pieces of the narrative they want to pull out from that interview during the event. That allows them during the rest of the experience to begin picking out the observations that will really build the story for them in a cohesive way. For so many years, there's been this tradition of journalists sort of staying away from the business side of things and even looking down on it to some degree. Town Night allowed so many of us with, careers in journalism to take a step back and really delve into that side, understand, the way the industry is working, the way technology is working, and the way profit works. And so to really enter an environment where we were learning about the incredible optimism and possibility that's out there really shifted my perspective. The idea that we can use our online lives to bring us offline and to connect us further to each other is always hugely appealing to me. There's value in creating experiences that can't be completely automated. In this time of huge flux in media, we have to be so sure not to let go of that human storytelling. And so vital to who we are as a culture. And I'm happy to stand up for that.
That's our show for today. For more information on what you just saw, log onto our website at CUNY.tv or visit our Study with the Best Facebook page. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.